Hey y'all, I'm Peppermint, and this is Pep and Hugh's Queer 101 podcast, where we spill all the tea about the selections from our book club, Queer History 101, available exclusively at Alstora.com. Now look, queerness is everywhere, and queer people are too, and always have been, but our history has not always been so easily accessible. Changes in cultures, language, and yes, even politics have oftentimes made it really difficult to openly identify with and explore one's connection to queer identity. Queer people, like other marginalized groups, are often very politically active and have been throughout history. And we've not only been instrumental in fighting for our own rights, but oftentimes queer people are at the forefront of major political movements. The history books, though, we read in school do not always reflect that. And what's worse, there is even a move to ban books all over the country. So we are working to bring you these stories one by one. Hugh! How you doing?
Oh, it's been, I don't know. So a couple of things happened in the last week or two. I don't know about you. I think there was some kind of a election, some kind of apocalypse, devastation of my soul. I don't know. I'm having a hard time remembering. November 4th, though.
I thought it was a nightmare. I don't know. Maybe did I wake up from it?
It feels like it.
You know what it is? It's an opportunity. I
like this spin. Tell me more.
Well, look, I think a lot of people, just as I mentioned in the intro, a lot of people aren't that politically active. And I think a lot more people have become more politically active, not just as a result of the election, but leading up to. I think people, I remember a moment in time, a day and age, where talking politics was something that you could easily avoid. And you could live your life and go an entire day, week, month without really engaging in politics, especially with other people that you knew. And now it just seems like it's everywhere. As soon as you open your phone, anything you see and take, it is just politics, just sort of woven in with entertainment. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
It's like what you were saying a second ago about how queer history, we've been everywhere, we are everywhere, we just don't always know. I think nowadays we're doing the same with politics. It's like we're thinking about what does it mean politically to like a certain movie or to support a certain party or to even go to a certain venue, depending on where they put their money, where they put their energy, where they put their time. Mm-hmm. I don't know about you, but I just don't have time to be supporting people who don't support queer folks. And this election has made that even clearer.
It's true. We have been flirting with the idea of starting up a podcast or some type of reservoir of information for people. And finally, we have the chance to do it because we partnered with Alstora.com. And I'm super excited. If you're watching this now, you should go immediately after this conversation and go on over to Alstora.com and sign up, because we would love for you all to get involved in our book club, which really gives everybody an opportunity to learn about and hear about our history and our community in a different way. Don't you think?
Yeah, because here's the truth. Learning about our history and surviving the next 4 years is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. And so my hope, I think, is that our listeners are going to enjoy this month after month, having a time to check in with us, check in with each other, drop their comments about the books through Alstora, through Eric, through RuPaul, through the community that they've founded that we're now part of. I think we're going to support each other, I hope, through the next 4 years and beyond, because we need it.
I'm really, really fascinated, and this is what I'm most interested in. I'll be honest. I'm not the biggest reader. I could read you, but I'm not the biggest reader. But I am really, I'm just fascinated with history in general. I live in New York, as we both do, and I think of the time that I like to spend wasting my time, and so it goes back and forth between maybe a cat video here and there, but I am really, really fascinated by just history in general, seeing old images of people in the learning about the subways or how that was built or what happened here and there. And I'm just excited about that in general. let alone like sort of a queer overlay on top of it, or like understanding about who the people were. And so this will be a really good opportunity to do that, especially when I open my mind and I think about, because, it's probably it's no mystery and certainly no surprise. I've been involved in sort of advocacy, LGBTQ advocacy for a long time. And that's where I feel the most comfortable, besides on a stage performing. And, obviously advocacy and sort of social justice are connected to history for sure. But I never was really very preoccupied with how history has impacted all of these things that were, like all of these things up until this moment. And it wasn't until recently I read a book that I really just loved, Cast, The Origin of Our Discontent. And it really opened my mind to how different systems in general, but systems of oppression and then other operational systems have worked together, sort of in the same way or in very similar ways throughout history. And that is a part of our queer history and our queer present, for sure, like where we are right now.
Absolutely. I mean, Isabel Wilkerson is so smart, and I think that her work is a great lens through the world. But it's funny because I actually associate you with queer history, and not just because you and I have personal history.
Oh,
but
you call me
I
old?
saw Head Over Heels. I'm calling us old. Us.
Okay.
We're historic. That's all. But I saw you in Head Over Heels, and not only was that fabulous and queer and exciting and weird, it also brought me into this deep dive into the Go-Go's, who I did not know much like a lot of the history we're going to be discussing on this podcast. I had no idea how cool, how rad, how out there, how wild the Go-Go's were, So I think that as a performer, you are constantly bringing layers, you are constantly bringing queerness, you're constantly bringing history and advocacy and activism. And in some ways, look, I love what I do, I do it because I love it. But not everybody's going to pick up a history book, and we need to be everywhere because we are everywhere. And speaking of that, let's get into the prime part of our event today.
Yes.
We're going to be talking with Will Tosh, the Director of Education at the Globe Theatre, which was built in London in 1599 for William Shakespeare's acting company, the Lord Chamberlain's Men. Now, I think you know that, and I think one day you're going to be on that stage. But what a lot of our listeners probably don't know is that Will Tosh is the author of our book pick for this month, Straight Acting, The Hidden Queer Lives of William Shakespeare. Now, you and I talked about this. What we love about this book, for those of you listening, is that Tosh isn't debating whether Shakespeare was queer. As he writes in the introduction, it doesn't take a whole book to say, probably. Instead, Tosh takes all the queer plots, myths, ideas, slangs, and love triangles in Shakespeare's work and shows us where Shakespeare would have heard about, or directly experienced, all of those queer things. In school, in classical mythology, and of course in the bars and theaters of Elizabethan London, just like the bars and theaters we experience them in today. The result is a fabulous, unexpected crash course in 16th century sexuality, which we guarantee you is raunchier, wilder, and queerer than you ever expected. If it's cool with you, Will, just jump right in and ask, who are you? And what do you do?
I am a Director of Education at Shakespeare's Globe in London, which is where I'm speaking to you today. I help to run our higher education and research side of things. So the Globe, as well as being an amazing theatre and an amazing place to visit in London, also runs a really substantial academic research programme. So we think about Shakespeare's plays in their own time, and we think about Shakespeare's plays today, and we think about the work that they're put to in today's societies in the UK and the US and around the world. And we ask questions about the stories that Shakespeare's plays tell and how we can use Shakespeare's plays to think with. And we do that through research programs and book writing, like this one.
Okay, but Will, who are you really?
That was a very professional answer, wasn't it? So I am I'm a scholar of Renaissance and Shakespearean literature and culture, and I have a background in archival research. So I did a whole bunch of work on the kind of letters that Elizabethan men write to each other and the kind of language they use in those letters. And I have a little early career in theatre, so I've always been kind of obsessed with Shakespeare and Shakespeare's work, and a massive homosexual. So sort of thinking about Shakespeare as kind of a sort of, I think like a lot of us who were taught Shakespeare at school and study his work at university and maybe even go on to further study, he's really in the bones, isn't he? And you absorb so much so many scripts about how to kind of be a person, for good and bad, but so much of the way I think about human relationships comes from Shakespeare and from other literature. And for me, that has never been a conflict. I'm very lucky, I think, for lots of people it has been, but I've always felt that work and that material speaks to me and speaks to the way I think about the world and the way I love and the way I think about my identity. So he's always been a really fundamental part of how I think about queer desire. And that was sort of why I wanted to write the book. So I was like, I can't be the only person who thinks this. And I know that the time Shakespeare lived in was pretty different to ours for obvious reasons, and not necessarily amazingly better when it comes to how society thought about queer desire. But it just definitely did something, and that world and that culture had a way of thinking about identity and desire and sexuality that we can learn from, and has informed our society. But we're not, as a society, very good at acknowledging, and that's what I wanted to change.
Sure. Well, so let's get this out of the way. What would you say to a modern critic who says to you, the word gay meant happy in Shakespeare's time, and you're forcing all of these weirdo queer ideas onto him?
It still means happy, Hugh, let's be honest.
Truth.
Look, I think I would, that's actually kind of we hear that a lot, don't we, in lots of different contexts. And I would say that to one extent, this person is right, then the words, the terminology we use have a history. They have 120, 130 years of history in English, a bit longer in other languages, and very different words are used in different cultures around the world. But the feelings and the thoughts and the emotions and the identities are human. That's just what they are. And language changes over time to account for that in different ways. There are lots of things in the past or that have a name now that have a history to them. And we can still think about those concepts in whether that's something like feminism or socialism, or that doesn't mean people didn't think about how gender and power and capital and wealth relate to each other in years before the 19th century.
Right.
And so sexuality is no different. So that's the first thing I would say. I guess the other thing is sort of what's behind that question? Behind that question is anxiety about appropriateness or particular figures who are perceived to suffer if we ask questions about their sexual identity or their desires, if they're not straight as a die, 100% heterosexual and ideally very masculine. That's not a premise that I accept, or lots of people accept. It seems to bring too much with it in terms of baggage. So I think that you can see where those questions come from, partly because I think they come from a little bit of knowledge and quite a lot of prejudice. And that little bit of knowledge is, sexuality is a modern concept, therefore we can't talk about it in the past. That's been really unhelpful for lots of reasons, and I think we can do away with that. We can just kill it. Let's just kill that as a concept and think about the languages and the words that people use varying over time to describe human beings.
I think it also has a lot to do with the sort of straight washing of a lot of our, historical figures, for sure. Mm-hmm. So where would Shakespeare have encountered all of these queer ideas that you're talking about?
So one of the things that I just find obsessively fascinating about Shakespeare's era is that on the one hand, it's not a great time to be queer in lots of different ways. It's saying sodomy between men is a capital crime. You're sentenced. You could be sentenced to death for it. Church, obviously, the Christian Church, Protestant faith, very hostile to any form of sexuality or sexual expression that is like anything separate to married couples having sex just for the procreation of children. This is not a time that leans into just be yourself, like at all.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, this is a culture that venerates the classical past, Greece and Rome, and they knew what went on in Greece and Rome in the way we do today. All of that was if not common knowledge, then certainly privileged knowledge among those people who could read Latin and were given that sort of education. And then alongside that sort of classical past that has a really kind of strong queer component, you have a popular culture in Shakespeare's time, in Shakespeare's London, where one of the standout forms of literature and entertainment and popular culture is a theatre scene that platforms a kind of form of homoeroticism as one of its kind of chief interests. So young boys and young adolescents, young men playing female roles, and playwrights really leaning into the kind of irony and wit and sort of kind of erotic kind of humor behind them, because that was what audiences liked. So for me, that sort of patchwork of culture is Shakespeare's inheritance. This sort of adoration and veneration of the Greek and Roman past, this very kind of sort of knockabout, active, sexually lively city, London in the 1600s, 1590s, 1600s, and a theatre scene that just traffics in forms of queer desire that are both sort of fun and interesting and quirky, and also in some senses kind of disturbing and kind of objectifying. But they were there as well as part of the scene that Shakespeare knew.
Queer people in the theater. Whoever would have guessed?
I mean, what a surprise, right?
You know what would surprise people if they couldn't even settle their minds around the fact that Shakespeare could have possibly been gay or queer, is the way that you talk about Shakespeare and folks like him, and how they seem to think that just really differently about what human bodies were actually made of, and the thought that spontaneous gender transition is possible. And so can you talk a little bit about this idea?
Yeah, well, as we know on this call, I'm sure loads of your listeners know that just as ideas about sexuality and sexual desire have histories, so do concepts of gender identity and the relationship between gender and sex and gender and sexuality. And Shakespeare's time was no different. These things had a currency that was different to our currency, largely because your kind of medical knowledge and sets of beliefs that Shakespeare's culture had inherited, again, largely from Greece and Rome, were based around ideas of the body that are different to most sort of medical established ideas today, but not all, and not different to medical cultures around the world necessarily. But basically understood that that developing bodies in the womb started out as one thing and became something else, and the idea was that most bodies growing in the womb started out as female and became male in a process of development. And the very misogynistic patriarchal society that Shakespeare lived in understood that as a process of refinement, bodies becoming more like gods, because God obviously. So that process of evolution and development left open the possibility that through life, or after birth certainly, and then through life and later life, bodies could change, usually in the direction of from male to female, although not exclusively. And there weren't large numbers of people living those lives and talking in that way, but it was understood to be a possibility. And that played into ideas about gender presentation as well. There was a sense that if one's actual bodily gender presentation or sex was something that might be flexible, it became even more important, said the society, to be really firm about how you manifested your gender. How men were men and women were women, and women did things that that put them in a box that said female, and men did things that put them in a box that said male, because the worry was that something might change if they didn't do that. Now, that's what society was telling people, and telling them that really clearly through church pulpits and through schoolrooms and all sorts of things. But theatre seemed to really kind of play fast and loose with that. This idea that boys are playing girls, and there are plays where gender gets switched around in the course of the drama, and so that seems again to be a point where Shakespeare Society was saying, well, okay, fine, this is what our culture says we ought to do, but where are the edgelands? Where can we push at that? Where can we change that?
This is interesting. This is something that we thought, Pep and I were talking about this earlier, and we thought this was surprising to us and would surprise listeners to this too. Now, if you accept that Shakespeare has queer content, because, even when I was in high school in the 90s, it was a rumor, it wasn't official, but we talked about that fact. We certainly did not talk about other queer writers and playwrights from Shakespeare's time. So we were intrigued by the other folks you wrote about. John Lily? Lily? Is he the Rihanna of his day? Rai? What are we talking about?
He's definitely he's the Lily. He's the Lily, but he's definitely Lily, not the Lily. I like.
Right. Well, tell us about him. Who is he? And what was this show that he did of Galatea and Philydia?
So John Lilly really deserves his time in the sun, I have to say. So he's a playwright of Shakespeare's era. He's becomes very popular, very successful a few years before Shakespeare does, and he writes a series of plays for a company of adolescent boys, children, who are they're choristers mostly, boys who sing in a choir, and as a sort of side hustle, they are semi-professional actors, and in fact they perform in a commercial playhouse in London. So John Lilly is this really well-connected, courtly kind of writer. He writes prose and also plays, and he has a wonderful kind of sort of witty, florid style that everyone goes crazy for. He's slightly mannered, but he writes these short, really punchy, really funny, interesting plays. One of his big successes was a play in 1588 called Galatea. And Galatea is sort of the fundamental text for all of those mistaken identity, girl dressed as a boy comedies that we think are Shakespeare's invention. And he certainly does that, and he does that in lots of his plays. But he's inspired by John Lilly in Galatea, because John Lilly writes this play for his company of boy actors, where two young people in a wood, young people who have spent their lives presenting as young women, as girls, are sent into the wood to hide from a monster. Just go with it. This is what the story is. They're sent into the woods to hide from a monster. Dressed as boys, because one of the things about them, the monster goes for young virgins. So they're sent into the woods disguised as boys as a sort of preservation technique by their.
Is the monster just men?
I think it seems to me you're a reader of literature. I think this is definitely. Yeah. So the monster is in this case, the monster is just like a monster, but we can do lots of sort of subtextual readings about what that monster might represent. So when they're in the woods, Galatea and Philydia, who are going by the names of their dads, Tityrus and Meliboeus, meet each other and fall in love, and both think the other is a boy. But do they? There's definite space for sensing that both of them actually kind of know who the other is. They fall in love. Their love is very real. It gets to the end of the play when they emerge, still in their boy disguise, to be confronted by sort of like their dads and a whole lot of gods and all of the townspeople. They say very boldly and very bravely, we love each other. Even after that moment of exposure when the dads say, but you're both girls. Fortunately, Venus, goddess of love, is around. And she says, look, I don't ever want to see petty things get in the way of love and faith. So she says, look, it's fine. We're going to go to the chapel where we're going to get married. These two are going to get married. And as they pass into the church, one of them will become a That'll sort it out. And that's what happens. And that's what happens at the end of the play. We don't learn which of the young people becomes a man or transitions. It sort of doesn't really matter. We're told that their love means something, and what Venus does is make it possible for them to marry. And it's an incredibly powerful story for lots of us today, but it's also, I think, a lesson for Shakespeare in terms of what you can do with embodied dramatic irony when you have someone playing a part, presenting in a certain way, meeting someone when they're presenting like that, and finding some kind of new connection, which is what he does in his play. As You Like It, in Twelfth Night, he does it later in Cymbeline as well. It's a trope thing, and he learns it from Lily. And what's really exciting about what Lily is doing is registering that when you've got actors, people embodying these parts, there's even more going on than if you were just to tell a story where that was the narrative, because the bodies of the performers form part of that effect, and the bodies of the audiences form part of that connection and that effect. And that's what Shakespeare learns from Lily. What you can do by layering, you're layering your story in your bodies.
I love that. So this play was a troupe of boy actors playing girls, playing boys. Honey, I have no idea why we never were taught this.
It makes me think of that British song. That song from the 90s. Boys who like girls who are boys who like...
There we go.
Girls
there
like
we go.
girls.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I never knew it was a Shakespearean quote.
I mean... what you say, about theater, it's so true. I certainly feel that, even if I don't have the ability to do as much Shakespeare as I would have wanted to do. But if you had the opportunity to take any classic, I gotta come. I mean, darling. The closest I got was doing Head Over Heels on Broadway. It was in blank verse, and it was transcendent, if I say so myself. But I do want to ask you a question. If you could take any Shakespearean play, with all of its queer context sort of restored, because it has been sort of straightwashed over the years for sure. Which play would you choose, and what response would you expect?
Well, so this is a really great question, and it is quite hard to think of one, given the degree of queer content in quite a lot of Shakespeare's plays. But I really love Twelfth Night, Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. It's one of it's a beautiful comedy, sort of plangent in terms of its tone. It's fabulous. It involves it's another disguised heroine play. So one of the lead characters, Viola, washes up on shore after a shipwreck and disguises themselves as a boy called Cesario, and Cesario then falls in love with the Duke Orsino, and Orsino falls in love with Cesario as well, but Orsino sends Cesario after the woman he's supposed to be wooing called Olivia, and Olivia falls in love with Cesario. So but what's really interesting is that Viola / Cesario has a twin brother called Sebastian, who is somewhere else. And Sebastian obviously looks exactly like Viola, and Viola is super hot, and everyone falls in love with Viola instantly. So Sebastian. And Sebastian is when we first meet him in a committed and loving relationship with a sea captain called Antonio. And Antonio and Sebastian end up kind of going off to where Viola's been washed ashore. Chaos ensues inevitably, and Sebastian does end up marrying Olivia. But I think in a very throuple marriage of convenience kind of way, because Antonio definitely stays around. And what Olivia wanted was a young husband she can boss around, who Sebastian clearly is. So there's something very delightful about the way in which those sorts of different queer networks get allowed to live at the end of Twelfth Night. And I don't see that very often on stage. And I would love to see a really kind of, not so much even a kind of modern adaptation, but like a production that really sort of understands that those dynamics are deep within the play. And I have seen some wonderful queer Twelfth Nights. In fact, just recently there was a wonderful one in London directed by Owen Horsley at the Regent's Park Open Air Theatre. And we've done some lovely Twelfth Nights at the Globe as well that really lean in that direction. But I think we can still go further. So I would like to see a very queer Twelfth Night, please.
Well, when you and Peppermint do that at the Globe, I will definitely be first in line for a ticket.
Right.
I am ready to see that production.
Right. Let's make this happen.
Okay, well, we've got a couple of little lightning rounds for you.
Okay.
We loved the way that you wrote the book, the way that you used all of this evidence about the world Shakespeare's in to kind of look at the plays and look at queer experiences he might have had, how this rubric that you devised kind of told us what was queer about him, about his work. So, we're going to ask you to tell us, using your rubric, your evidence, everything you know, how gay the following Shakespearean characters are. Number 1. Hamlet.
85%.
80. Ophelia must be pissed.
Oh, I think it's quite high. I mean, I think there's a lot going on with Hamlet and Horatio, for example. There's a lot that's underlying. Well, there's a lot that underlies really close, elite, educated male friendship. And a lot of that is to do with passionate feeling. I mean, whether it's like fully sexual feeling or not, I don't know. But it's definitely queer.
It's there. Okay. Number 2. Perhaps the most famous romantic lead in Shakespeare, Juliet.
I mean, I would say relatively low, I think. But she is transgressive in other ways. So I think she gets extra points for, like, trying.
Plus, she's like 16, so there's like hope, in the future. She hasn't gone to college yet.
She's 13. I'm just going to say it. She's 13 years old.
Right. Yeah. So we could give her a little time.
Yeah.
Okay. The 3 witches from Macbeth.
Oh, yeah, quite high. I mean, sort of witchiness and queerness, wonderful, fabulous overlap. We'll definitely take that. And they just sort of fuck things up, don't they? I mean, that's kind of weird value. We'll go high.
They give me very 70s, throuple, polyamorous, 70. Yeah,
right.
70%, definitely.
Right, 70%, definite queer, like, polycule energy in the 3 witches.
Yes, this is a production I also would like to see.
Yes, thank you. I'm making notes.
We've got 2 more for you.
Okay,
Henry IV.
So the king or just so the king probably not low, although he's quite phobic. So the character is pretty phobic about Richard II, who he takes the crown from, and has some really unpleasant things to say about his behaviour and his mannerisms. So he's kind of anti-gay, but that of course always raises questions.
Yeah, I was gonna say we know those guys.
We know those guys. Yeah.
And this one, I mean, I don't know. The name kind of gives it away, but Bottom. Is he gay at all? A little bit?
He's a little bit. Well, he's sort of, again, it's like he's in that sort of, that kind of like very transgressive being turned into an animal world. That that's not straight, is it? Like, call it what you like, but it isn't. Yeah, it isn't straight.
Pigs, bears, otters. I think we all know what animals he's turning into.
Exactly. So yeah, the score is high.
Got to change my settings on the dating app. Okay, we got some quotes for you. We wanted to see how this rubric would match up to modern day, and so we got some quotes for you. We want you to take these quotes and make them Shakespearean and gay if you can. Okay, this one is from the problematic and infamous Kanye West, who said, "I actually don't like thinking. I think people think I like to think a lot. And I don't. I don't like to think."
So there is so Orlando. Okay, As You Like It, Shakespeare's As You Like It. The slightly dim-witted hero Orlando, who is being very actively seduced by Rosalind, who is going by the name of Ganymede and appears as a really hot boy. Says at one point towards the end of the play, he says, "I can live no longer by thinking." And it's a very queer moment. It's like him just kind of going like, his brain is sort of exploding at that point, that like this boy called Ganymede, who is really turning him on and is getting him very excited, is also pretending to be Rosalind, the woman he loves. It is Rosalind. He doesn't really know. He sort of knows. He half knows. And we're in Act 5 at this point, and he's just like, too much. I can live no longer by thinking. So there you go. That's the gay Shakespearean version of Can You.
I like it. Okay, here's one. Arnold Schwarzenegger said, "I think gay marriage is something that should be between a man and a woman?
I'm just thinking now of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and all I can think of is Exit pursued by a bear. That's it. That's my response to that line.
And then he just says, "I'll be back," while the bear chases him off stage.
I'll be back. Okay, here we go. Here's one more. Donald Trump says, in Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people in that came in and they're eating the cats.
No, all I can say is Shakespeare could never.
Huh?
Like, I couldn't. That one I couldn't.
Okay, good.
Pep, I gotta tell you, that impersonation was like a little too good, honestly. That was like a little, I have a little bit of a freak out there.
Oh, no! Me too. Gosh, I mean, when I think of Trump, I just start to get a little bit constipated, and then that's the voice that comes out. So maybe we're just all constipated. Okay. Let's release ourselves, for lack of a better word, and just relax a little bit and come think of something a little bit more obviously queer and gay. Sabrina Carpenter says, I can't, this is a lyric, I can't relate to desperation. My give a fucks are on vacation.
This is hard. This one's hard. Partly because I'm like 102 years old, and I'm like, who is Sabrina Carpenter? But okay, so my brain goes to Hamlet, the semi-gay person we talked about earlier, and at one point he just says, "Man delights not." What I think is sort of what Sabrina's getting. I'll go with that.
Yep. I can see that. I
dig it. Well, that was a great lightning round of the quote game. I think we should do that on the next podcast.
Yeah.
There, Hugh.
Will, we might invite you back to make more things Shakespearean and gay in the future. You never know.
No, very, very happy to do that. Very happy.
So we got one more kind of like fun poppy question for you. All of us, every one of us, even if you do not and have never read an original piece of Shakespeare or seen it performed, have seen some kind of Shakespearean adaptation, even if we don't know it's a Shakespearean adaptation. So what are the absolute worst? What are the ones that really grind your gears? The ones where you're like, I cannot believe I watched that.
Oh no, I'm going to sound like a really sort of sunny and depressingly kind of cheerful person. So I actually think adaptations are quite good. Like, Shakespeare adaptations are good. They take the story, they do stuff with the themes. Like, so things like 10 Things I Hate About You is a really good adaptation of Taming of the Shrew. There's been an interesting adaptation of Othello set in a high school called O. And these are good. She's the Man and adaptation of Twelfth Night. These are sort of interesting. What I don't like are films about Shakespeare. Like, those are the things that tend to make me kind of go like that. Because... So I thought that we started this conversation thinking about sort of ideas we've inherited about the past that aren't borne out when you look at the past and actually think about how people thought and wrote to each other and wrote about their feelings. Most people who make films or tell stories about Shakespeare's time, willingly or not, that's what they've inherited. They've inherited those sorts of establishment ideas about Shakespeare's world. So we don't really ever see, I guess, what I write about in straight acting or what we've talked about today, that there are these areas of culture that acted as channels for queer desire and queer experience, and particularly queer male, and experiences of queer women and people of different genders was more complex in Shakespeare's time, no question. But we don't really see even that kind of possibility of life in Shakespeare's time. So although like it's a film, we all love it, like Shakespeare in Love is just sort of, it's kind of a nothing when it comes to thinking about actually how people might have thought and felt at that time in early modern theatre. It's like aggressively de-queered.
So what we're hearing from you is we need to do a queer remake of Shakespeare in Love starring Peppermint at the Globe Theatre. Yeah. That's basically.
I'm glad my implicit comment was heard loud and clear. Yeah. Yes.
Hey, we were talking about subtext and the body language in theater, and so I had to pick it all up. Now, I got to tell you, this is even more interesting now that this is a possibility. But what is next for you besides this Peppermint starring in Shakespeare at the Globe production? What's next on your what other historical writers will you be illuminating for us?
Well, I sort of wish I could kind of march on and just do lots of other centuries and lots of other writers, but I don't. I only really know about Shakespeare, so I might have to do volume two. I mean, my book closes at sort of in about 1599. There's lots more. There's lots more to say, and I want to sort of carve out time now and work at the Globe to try and write lots more, because I had such a blast writing this one, and it excites me that people are reading it. It's just a really nice thing.
Wow. Well, Hamlet 2, there's a Hamlet 2, so it's ready.
Well, they are reading it, honey. Everybody in our book club is reading it.
Yes, that's what we love.
I know. They are going to love this. I think that this is a fascinating book for those of us. I mean, anyone who kind of grows up in our Western culture is inundated with Shakespeare. And once they read your book, they'll know they're inundated with the incorrect version of Shakespeare.
That's what I hope. Shakespeare is for everyone, including the queers, including us.
Well, thank you, Will.
Well, we are so happy that you were able to join us for this conversation. We are really grateful that you are doing that work of sort of helping everyone see that we've always been here as queer folks, and even going back and sort of letting us understand Shakespeare, I honestly think in a much more interesting way. When we know a lot more about the writer, then of course their work becomes even that much more interesting. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, Will, you're our first guest. Thank you so much.
I'm very, very honoured. Thank you for opening your series with straight acting. I can't tell you how much about how happy that makes me. Thank you.
That was fantastic. Hey, y'all, I don't know about you, but I'm really looking forward to this. I mean, like we just mentioned, this is our very first episode, and we are so happy that you all are watching. We're really grateful that you all are interested in this, and we really want to get to know a little bit more about what this audience could be, because we're building this community right now. I know that I have my interest, and Hugh has his, and you have yours. So, number one, we want to know exactly what you think. Now, if you are already a member of our book club, thank you, and you're welcome for that 75% discount doorling. And if you're not, then you can click the link on our socials. You can go to my link in bio. You can go to Alstora, and you can join up so that you're in time for our next book. But we cannot even close the book on this book until we talk about what we liked about it. Now, I'm it's gonna sound so I don't know how it's gonna sound. I like learning. Is that
controversial?
That's it. I'm really oh my gosh, don't tell anyone. I'm really grateful that Will, I mean, I had a certain thought about Shakespeare and sort of that whole vibe and way of talking and being, and it just shows us that Shakespeare's work, being such great work, is around us all the time. Obviously, we learn it in our version of it in high school, and as sort of mandatory reading, and then now if you look into pop culture, there were so many, especially around the early aughts, an explosion of sort of remade and Shakespeare inspired or literally remade stories. And so I wasn't sure, I didn't realize that until later. I was like, oh, some of my favorite things are literally a Shakespeare play. But even beyond that, I'm just really grateful that with this book, he's able to reintroduce the world of Shakespeare without having to trick us into seeing a bunch of teenagers trying to do it. It's just here is this world, and it just shows me that there's so many other avenues that we can go, with going back into history. It can be fun,
I agree. For me, my senior year of high school, back in the last century, we had to do all Shakespeare. It's the only thing we studied. Maybe we read a couple other things, but there's a lot of Shakespeare. And we got asked to do presentations at the end of the year where we showed films based on Shakespeare. And I showed my class My Own Private Idaho, which is the like raunchy, sexy Keanu Reeves, River Phoenix version of Henry IV. And it like blew people's minds, made them super uncomfortable. And I, at the time, thought, this is fabulous. River Phoenix is so hot. And also, like, isn't it great that someone is reimagining these classics with queer content? I had no idea that they were actually pulling out, as Will told us, like the actual queer context. I had no idea what I was even seeing. And so to read Will's book, I think helps me sort of like reimagine my entire experience with Shakespeare, where what I felt was like, oh, I'm being told I'm imposing something on him, was there all along, which is in fact how I feel about all of queer history. It's over and over again. We're being told we've stepped over a line, we're talking out of turn, we shouldn't be sharing these things, but the truth is it's always there, it's always part of the conversation. We're always in the world because we're part of the world. And I think Will's book really helps illustrate that, at least for me.
Did you, in the class, they knew, no one was disputing the fact that this was Henry IV. Like, they weren't saying that this is too gay, it couldn't possibly be
those
Shakespeare.
Kids were so freaked out
because
they could barely
it's
even
documented.
speak. It was hilarious.
What about the teacher? I mean, it's approved, right?
It was the end
approved.
of the year, and I think he had checked out too. I can tell you, we had to do it in pairs, and my partner he was like, I don't care, whatever video you want to do, pick the movie. And I was like, you're going to regret that. And indeed, he did. But to his defense, he rolled with it. He tried to pretend like he was expecting the blowjob scene. In retrospect, I'm very surprised neither one of us got like kicked out of school after doing that. But at the time, that never occurred to me. I just thought it'd be funny.
Expecting the blowjob scene. That's my favorite quote from you today, for sure. And hello. Yeah, well, I'm really curious to know from you all, the viewers, like I said, trying to build our community and our audience here. I want to know, like, what types of books would you be interested in? Leave that in the comments below. Let us know. And then for those of you who have read Straight Acting and are already a part of the book club, what are your favorite quotes from the book? Now, I want to say, like, right off the bat, you mentioned Will's intro, and I really appreciate how he was able to sort of contextualize today. With like what we're going through today with regards to race, class, and gender and sexuality, and sort of bring the book to us as opposed to just transporting us back into time. And I think he did us a really great service by doing that. And then the other thing I have to say is my favorite quote from the book. I
picked out one too.
Darling. My quote. Okay, you picked up one too. My quote from the book is, "There isn't a man who isn't a bugger." As her male partner promises, "This time I will do it in your cunt and in your rear." Another. "Both in your cunt and your arse, as they say. My cock will make me joyful and you happy and blissful." Honey, truer words have never been spoken.
I really am so impressed that this guy's thinking about his partner. Not only will it make my cock joyful, it'll make you happy and blissful. Sexual reciprocity.
And if my cock's joyful, then yours? Yeah, hello. I don't really know, but yeah.
Okay, look, my quote is not quite as
What's your
fun,
quote?
I have
What's
to
your
admit,
quote?
but it is from the introduction, and I could really picture Will kind of like shouting this at somebody, so that's what made me excited about it. So, here's the quote. "Enough! Enough with the ignorant misrepresentation of Shakespeare's time as an era innocent of queer sexuality. Enough with the homophobic suspicion that queer emotion is unwelcome or inappropriate. Enough with the weirdly self-contradictory stance that enables people to hold both views simultaneously." What I love about this is that is how I feel talking about queer history all the time. Enough with telling us that, one, it doesn't exist, and even if it didn't exist, we shouldn't talk about it, right? It's like, how can you hold both those thoughts at the same time, people?
Only if, and it's kind of what Will was saying, maybe in relation to, absolutely in relation to this question when you asked about, to those who say this is you're overlaying this queerness that wasn't really there. We don't really know, so why are you doing it? And so, like, it really is more telling when you examine where that question's coming from,
Yeah.
why that question or that assertion is being made. Like, oh, it's not important. We sit through history, not only in history class, we sit through history books, we sit through history programs that sit there and pontificate on what everybody, none of us were there. There's no video proof. And we sit there and we hear about all types of stuff, especially stuff between like heteronormative relationships and like how great this person was in this battle and this war and what he must have thought and who he did. Well, why can't we do that for the queer people? You know what I mean? Why can't we do that for other marginalized groups? And that's what we are here.
Yeah, and not to like pump up our book club yet again, but you listeners really should join, because here's the truth. We didn't even think to ask him that question, but when you talk to experts, when you talk to the folks who write the books, they jump immediately. They have so much expertise. Will immediately knew not only was the important part of that the question we asked him, but to push us to a place to say, like, well, why are people thinking like that? Here's, in my experience, why people think that way. And getting that kind of access to him, I mean, that's the reason I'm doing this book club. I love getting to hear your thoughts, his thoughts, and talking to all of the authors that we're going to talk to. So for our first interview, I thought this went...
I think it did too. I mean, aside from the fact that my my camera is like beaming in from probably from 1689, and I'm sorry for that. But them's the breaks. It's not a live show, but it's like almost live, and so I promise on the next one it'll be much, much, much better. Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I agree. I couldn't agree any more that up against the backdrop of so many book bans and so much discrimination and so many people talking from a position of pseudo authority about who we are as queer people, as trans people, as people of color, for myself, for all these different marginalized communities, as folks who are undocumented immigrants. They're talking in such a way, with such authority about who we are, what we want, and what should happen to us, without really involving us, those different groups, people from those groups, in the conversation. And here is an opportunity, as far as the LGBTQ plus community is concerned, is to really like assert who we are, and let us pontificate on our own about who we might have been.
Yeah.
You don't have to tell us.
And let us talk about it together. Do you know? Like, I think you and me and Will talking about queer life and queer history are going to come to a way better answer than all of those like straight commentators who tell you there's nothing to talk about, nothing to see here at all. So I think for me, I love this community. I'm really excited, and I think that we have done a real wonderful job for this starting place, and I'm excited to see where we go next. So this is the other thing, listeners. If you're listening right now and you have thoughts about like what you'd like to read about, what you'd like to hear about, books, artists, people, like drop them in the comments. Let us know. We want to get to know you.
Absolutely. And stay tuned, because we not only do we have another fabulous conversation coming up next month with another fabulous author, we're going to be announcing our next book very, very soon. So just stick with us. Make sure you're following both myself and Will Tosh, of course, and Hugh, and also going over to our store so that you can join. This has been great. I'm super excited. Whew. Yeah, this is awesome.
This is a great day. All right.
Yeah,
Talk to you soon,
this is
Pep.
great. Sounds good. All right. Bye, everybody.